All right, welcome to the first of its kind, world-changing manufacturers network. Lisa Ryan has her ears to the ground and her heart in the game. Get ongoing education and new connections right here with Lisa and the Manufacturers Network. Buckle your seat, listen, and spread the word. Here's Lisa.
Hey, it's Lisa Ryan. Welcome to the Manufacturers Network podcast. I'm excited to introduce our guest today, John Conafay. John is co-founder and CEO of Integrate, and since April of 2022, John has been leading Integrate in Seattle, Washington, where he's dedicated to building the tools he wished he had at all of his previous hardware companies. So, John, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
So share with us a little bit about your background and what led you to doing what you do with Integrate.
Yeah, absolutely. Former U.S. Air Force Communication Navigation Mission Systems on AWACS, about as heavy as you can get when it comes to machinery. And then went to Arizona State University, where I found a club called Students for the Exploration and Development of Space, which is what got me into the space industry. And then have since worked for $3 billion space startups that nobody's ever heard of because they're not named SpaceX. But ABL Space Systems, Astranis, interned at Spire Global, also worked at Bryce Tech and NASA Office of the Chief Financial Officer, and have, been an early employee at each one of those, very early, before 50, usually before 15, and went through hyperscaling with the vast majority of them, and all of them were either building small spacecraft or rockets, and that's what led me to starting Integrate. I saw a consistent thread where collaboration is at the heart of hardware engineering and building ambitious machines, but all the software tools that we used were built for software and didn't really facilitate that collaboration or communication necessary, whether it's from the design engineer to the machinist or customer to the design engineer. Communication has always been pretty stagnated, so wanted to fix that with Integrate.
Okay. So how do you feel that digital platforms help manufacturers streamline the processes to enhance that collaboration that you just mentioned in project management?
Yeah, I think a lot of organizations do work at risk if they're doing everything in spreadsheets or communicating via email, because you don't have basic change logs, audit logs of the decisions that are being made. And one of the things that we hear most all the time is, yeah, we just went with Google Sheets, but we really regret it because now we're in our prototype and we don't remember all of the decisions we made or why we made them for specific manufacturing. So it feels like we're just repeating ourselves with regard to creating new requirements that we'd created before, but had already made decisions as to why those requirements didn't actually make sense. Not using proper tools, just means that you're doing a lot of the design work at risk and not keeping that institutional knowledge with the company as opposed to with the people. And people can leave. Software generally can't sprout legs.
Right. Okay. So, and I'm sure you have several, but can you share a case study where the implementation of a digital platform significantly improved that efficiency or reduced downtime? And especially if you have a manufacturing example, that would be even better.
Yeah, it's not necessarily software, but I love putting design engineers on the manufacturing floor to cut down on the communication overhead necessary. I think where we've seen it in our own customers is largely customer requirements flow down through to engineering and then manufacturing, where what we built is this kind of infinite portal that allows you to communicate with all of your customers directly, as opposed to having to download spreadsheets and send them. So the feedback can go directly from the customer to a manufacturing engineer if that's what's necessary, as opposed to having to go from the customer to a BD person, to a design engineer, to a manufacturing engineer, and sort of short-circuiting that by just adding the manufacturing engineer to the conversation and integrate specifically has reaped some great benefits and made a lot of our customers super happy.
So are they speaking the same language? If you have a customer that knows what they want and they are put directly in touch with the manufacturing engineer there, how do they figure out or maybe that's the better way of doing it? But it just seems that they would be speaking different languages since the manufacturing engineer would be really technical and may not explain it as well.
Yeah, I think this goes back to the doing work at risk when you don't have systems to track everything that's happened or context for everything that's being built. I think any engineer, no matter how lacking in communication skills, or customer, no matter how lacking in communication skills, as long as they have the correct context, can communicate pretty clearly. Adding a manufacturing engineer into a conversation where they can see the full audit log of all the decisions, conversations, problems has always been a benefit. I don't really ascribe to the belief that though I've been in BD the majority of the time, I don't really ascribe to the belief that engineers shouldn't talk to the customers. I think they come up with they're engineers for a reason. They come up with some of the most creative and spectacular solutions that I might not have thought about. So injecting them into the conversation is always a net positive as opposed to net negative. And it is a completely different situation if that person happens to be a huge asshole. Obviously you don't want that, but you don't really want that in any situation.
And it also, I think it cuts down the game of telephone. Exactly. That if you have the customer talk to this person who talks to that person who talks to that person, and finally it goes to the engineer and it's completely different. So it sounds like you're giving direct access then.
Yeah. Exactly. It's I think the biggest space companies in the world says the best part's one that you don't need or that you can remove, something along these lines. And I think that's very true of communication as well. The fewer steps to actually get the communication to the people that need to hear it, the better.
Right.
Yeah.
So what are some of the recent technological advances that are driving the progress in this manufacturing of sophisticated machinery?
I think it's technology that's been around for a long time, but people are just substantially more comfortable with it. Cloud computing allows for spectacular levels of simulation that you don't have to build a lot of internal infrastructure for. So you literally don't have to build server racks and hardware to run these complex simulations. You can just spin up something on AWS or Azure or anything like this, which is super beneficial, but also the level of security and trust in services like AWS GovCloud that allow for heightened levels of security and international trade and arms regulation compliance and things like this is really starting to get kicking in the past 3 years. And so I think it's more trust and comfort than it is extreme levels of innovation on the software side.
Okay. So how have these advancements improved production speed, accuracy, or cost efficiency in manufacturing?
Again, I think it goes to that having context for the decisions that were made previously. I think we've all seen a million times where you might be overloaded or overstressed and you're in a meeting and you're hearing the exact same conversation that you had heard 6 months ago about the exact same decision to be made. And you get to this decision fatigue point where you're just like, how do I can't give every bit of context that we did for this prior decision, but we're just spinning our wheels by remaking the same decision that led us to this point where we decided we needed to not do this thing. And so again, it goes back to context and communication, clarifying context, understanding where these decision points happened to cut down on making the same mistakes over and over again.
So you have a lot of experience in the space industry. So how are you seeing this being applied to manufacturers that are in these highly regulated markets in particular?
Yeah, I think one of the greatest examples comes to mind, of course, is SpaceX and Tesla, where they build software to reduce friction. That is the number one goal of, or should be the number one goal of any organization. Reduced friction increases safety, increases the well-being of the employees and margin ultimately. I think standardizing and automating processes so that paper shuffling jobs aren't the norm, but the people solving problems to reduce friction has been the highest impact, and that's what we're trying to do at Integrate, and a number of the or software for hardware companies are trying to do across the board. It's difficult because every hardware company seems to think that everything they've done has never been done before. And so the idea is that everything needs to be custom, but as with anything, you always see processes and manufacturing come to center or equilibrium with processes that have been performed before. There are some absolutely innovative companies out there that are pushing the boundaries and doing things that haven't been done before, but I think we can still learn a lot from our past. Yeah.
And you've mentioned the past a couple of times, but in the present, we have AI. So how is AI being involved in all of this?
Yeah, I think it goes back to the ability to search through institutional knowledge. If you're able to have an on-prem AI that does not screw with your compliance and international trade and arms regulations, is big for the space industry at least, but I'm sure there's data privacy and other concerns for a lot of other industries. Rooting through all of it's great to have all this context, but if you can't actually get to figuring out what it is, so saying, why did we make the decision for this tolerance on this specific part, into an AI platform that's on-prem, that's rooting through all of your internal systems to find that answer, as opposed to one person spending 3 weeks trying to find that answer. I think it's a huge benefit as long as it's closed and not doesn't have access to give your all of your data otherwise. There are, of course, privacy concerns all over the place.
So with all this, how would a company know that they have made some mistakes or they could be doing things more effectively that would lead to a conversation with you? What would be some signs that they should look for?
Yeah, if you're using 6 different systems to build one product, which is generally the case, that we will see people go from a product or systems diagram and SysML to Jira because it's quick and easy to set up for tasking, and then they'll have to glom on Smartsheet for Ganting and a number of other things, and then none of those really handle requirements, so they'll glom on JAMA, which is a 6 to 18-month process to get started, and you're pretty locked in and have a lot of sunk cost by the time you're done with that. And all of these systems should be seamlessly interrelated, because the doing leads to satisfying requirements, leads to getting the product finished on time, and any systems architecture changes are all tied and interrelated to those things. But when you have them spread across all of these disparate systems, you're just increasing, again, friction and room for error.
So is that just something that naturally happens? They start with one system, but then they get sold that they have to do it another way, and then they have to add another one? Or how do you actually get into that rabbit hole that all of that happens to get you to that point?
Yeah, it happens pretty much the exact same way at every company that we've spoken to, is that you start with the cheapest, easiest to set up, which is generally Jira, and you reach for it because it's there and you're in pain and you need a solution. And then you try to contort it to your processes as much as possible. And then you realize either that you do have the resources to hire people in to engineer and contort the system to what you need, up to 100 people or 250 people, or you aren't getting what you need, so you need to glom on a new system, and you reach out, and generally the other thing that's there is Smartsheet, because it's cloud platform on AWS GovCloud and all these things. Then you get so far down the rabbit hole with one of those systems and try to interrelate these two systems and realize that they don't terribly well. And as your team grows and your resources grow and you get to requirements definition, a little bit more mature with your requirements definition, you need a place to put all of those because Jira doesn't quite satisfy perfectly and Smartsheet doesn't. So it's just this kind of, okay, let's get more things to solve the process. And what our kind of thesis with Integrate is that people use generally about 30, maybe 50 to 60% of the features in each of those as they're scaling from 5 to 250 to 5,000. And so we wanted to consolidate the really core functions of all of those so you could start with a system that'll scale with you through some pretty spectacular hypergrowth phases that I've experienced at 3 or 4 companies now.
Yeah, I think about that just with my CRM that I use. I probably use about 1% of its capacity. I had some much bigger, more expensive systems before that I was probably even using less of their capacity.
Yeah.
So what are you actually doing then? Are you getting rid, if they have 10 different systems, are you getting rid of all of those and just going to one system that completely integrates and, oh, what a word, with all the others? Or are you getting those 10 systems to talk to each other nicer?
Yeah, so we're replacing some. We've had instances where people have fully replaced Smartsheet or some fully replaced Jira. Tough thing about Jira is that it's great for software engineering. It's really spectacular for software engineering. And we get the from my cold dead hands response on taking Jira software organizations. So we realized that we definitely have to play nice with Jira. So we're making a really robust, we've deployed an integration with that, but that we can, for a lot of hardware situations, we can do pretty much replace Smartsheet. And then for requirements, as long as we have the capability for flow downs and we're getting our requirements capability more robust every week or every month, we have the majority of what people need to scale from 5 to 250 people, if not 500 people, before they're like, okay, we need something doors or something that takes teams of 10 to 20 to manage. Did that answer the question?
Yeah, again, it's just trying to understand how all of this fits together. And I know that with the CRM that I just switched over to, now it helped me to get rid of probably 5 or 6 other programs that I was doing because it's all housed in one box.
Exactly.
So I was just trying to relate it to myself.
That's what we want to do.
Okay. So then what about sustainability? I know that's a huge buzzword with most of the programs and stuff that I talk about as far as sustainable practice. Are there things that you can do to also help manufacturers reduce the environmental impact in the systems that you're putting together?
I'm sure there are. I'm not sure how. Maybe people have to drive into work less. I'm not sure really. I hear a lot of stories all the time of, we're doing this to heal the earth. We're just trying to build software to help people build really cool stuff. Yeah, I absolutely would love if we had a substantial climate impact for the better, because it's rough, but I don't have a big story around it, to be completely honest.
Oh, it's all good, because I learn as much when I'm doing this, and sometimes the questions are applicable and sometimes they're not.
Yeah.
So when it comes to integrating, again, if somebody is listening to this, what would be your number one tip to decide, yes, this is a problem now, or it's leading us down a road where it could be a problem? What does that look like?
Yeah. If you are confident in your ability to remember each decision point along the way, who made it, why, and all the context around it, then you probably don't need a system like Integrate. If you're confident that your customers are not staring into a void as to what schedule you're providing and offering them and milestones that need to be met or payments and all this, and you think that they are perfectly happy with communication of all those things, and you probably do not need to integrate.
And if somebody did want to continue the conversation with you, what's the best way to get a hold of you, or what are some resources that they can check out?
Yeah, our website is integrate.co, and you can reach out to me on LinkedIn personally, and I'd be happy to talk to you. If you want to check out the platform, you can sign up for a free trial at integrate.co, and we'd love to hear from you.
And then what's your process if somebody does sign up for the free trial? What does that look like? Do they just get launched into it, or do they have online training, personal training? What does that look like?
Yeah, there's online training provided. There's an onboarding process built into the application, and we are always happy to provide live demos and walk through different use cases and things like this for our customers.
Okay, awesome. John, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been great having you on the show.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
I'm Lisa Ryan, and this is the Manufacturers Network Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Manufacturers Network Podcast. Do me a favor and share this podcast with your friends and colleagues so we can grow this network and connect more fantastic folks just like you. You can either send your buddies to the website at manufacturers-network.com or share the Manufacturers Network podcast on your LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or wherever you